Okay, hello everyone. So welcome to our paper to conference proposal workshop. I'm Dr. Cusick. I'm a core faculty member in the citing program. Um, there's three of us presenting, so.
I'll jump in on here. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Swamberg, and I am the user services librarian here, and all sorts of things research related. So we'll get into that in a second. Then Nosa.
And I'm Nosa Basaki. I'm a PsyD 3, and I'm also the graduate research assistant.
Right. So just to go over our agenda, what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to review components of a conference proposal, and we're going to compare different types. So how to do like a literature review proposal compared to how to do like a research proposal. So especially early on in training, doing a literature review, it can be, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but even taking like a course paper and the literature that you have on it, and then turning that into a poster or a presentation. We are going to review some sample proposals, so like what an abstract looks like, some of the different like parts, moving pieces in that. And then NOSA has done a great job of identifying potential conferences for submitting a proposal. And again, we'll talk about poster presentations, conference presentations, panel presentations, etc. And we have some good data that I think Stephanie said Georgia had pulled together on where MSP students have traditionally gone to do some of these different types of presentations. So in terms of what's in a conference proposal, so essentially looking at the type of the presentation, and again, I'll go over this a little bit more in the next slide, but whether it's a poster or like a speaking presentation, the title, so what is the title of your presentation? It's always a nice idea to, if you can have a catchy title that will get the attention of people. You list the author names, affiliations, and then write an abstract. So just describing your project. So again, from a literature review perspective, you're generally writing about like what are the components of what you're going to be talking about. Whereas with a research abstract, you would also include like methods and maybe like briefly like general information about your findings. So sometimes, and again, every conference is going to look a little bit different. Sometimes, besides requiring an abstract, they will require objectives, which are usually like learning objectives. So list 3 takeaways that conference attendees might get from your presentation. Sometimes they require, I think it ranges from like a full range of references. Sometimes they'll say, we want 3 references within the last 5 years. Like that. So it's very specific to each conference. I've seen a lot of different things. Keywords, again, what is it that you're talking about? So 1 or 2 words. If it is a research proposal, one of those keywords would probably be your method. And then a conflict of interest statement. I've seen this a lot more recently where you're just essentially disclosing if you had a financial interest in it, like did you receive a grant? Like you would just need to share that information. Oftentimes with students, you're just disclosing it's like a non-financial, so there's no conflict of interest. You're not making any money off of it. And so those are sort of some of the components in terms of a conference proposal. So looking at the different presentation types. So posters, again, this is a great way if you haven't presented at a conference and you want to start doing that at the master's or doctoral level, creating a poster, again, we have different templates that you can use, which we'll talk about in a different workshop, but sometimes you will present a poster in person at APA. There's like rows and rows and rows of posters You can see one of the pictures there with the blue carpet, that's probably an APA conference. The nice thing is in the last 5 years, there's been lots of opportunities to do a digital poster presentation, and a lot of conferences offer like a hybrid option. So if traveling to present, if you get accepted and traveling to a conference is cost prohibitive, there's oftentimes an option to do a digital poster. There's different kinds of oral presentations, talks, critical conversations, discussions, ranging anywhere from 15 to 90 minutes usually. And again, this is like, I think essentially like what we're all doing right now is we're giving a sort of a presentation on how to, again, create an abstract to submit to a conference. There's also different like panel presentations and symposia. So with a panel presentation, it's usually short presentations on a topic or a panel discussion of experts. And these tend to be interactive, so there might be lots of audience participation. Whereas with a symposia, you also definitely have sometimes several people presenting, but it's usually less interactive and it's more more narrowly focused. Anytime you are getting ready or thinking about presenting at a conference, you want to kind of look at the descriptions of what's available. Not every conference offers a panel presentation. Not everyone offers like a symposia. But they all typically have different types, different types of conference presentations, and usually a really good description of what they are considering that type of presentation. Poster proposals have a higher likelihood of acceptance, just because with a poster, you can have many of them there at one time. I know when I presented a poster at APA, the conference is 3 days long. The poster presentation, they gave us a time slot, like 1 hour on one of the days. And they were running all the time. So we went for that 1 hour, we put up our poster, people walked by, we presented. The next hour, 8 hours over the course of 3 days, it was a whole different group of people. So conferences can just accept a lot more poster presentations. Yes, in terms of, again, a really good opportunity for students. If you haven't done a first conference presentation, and if you're not necessarily, maybe you're not feeling like, okay, I'm not maybe ready to speak in front of a group of 150 people, but what's nice about a poster presentation is if you've done it with a couple of people, then the group of you can stand in front of your poster, people will come by and ask questions. It just gives you a chance to kind of interact and talk about your research. Same thing if you're doing a digital poster presentation. Sometimes I've done it where I worked with a past student and we did a poster presentation for APA, but we did a digital one and we just recorded. We had like a 5-minute recording of like, this is what our research was about. So again, different options depending on like where you're going to present. Most of what we're going to cover today is poster proposals, but a lot of this stuff does it will apply to those oral presentations as well. So I think from there, I'm going to turn it over to, I just did something with
That's okay. I said I'd forward the slides for NOSA.
oh, okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, turning it over to NOSA and stuff.
Thank you, Dr. Cusick and Stephanie. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you perfect.
perfect. So I'm going to talk about my experience of turning a course paper into a proposal. I actually started this in the master's program. I took the research course and Dr. Buzlis was teaching. And so I did my presentation on racial battle fatigue and anxiety in African American males. And I got a decent grade on the paper, and I was encouraged by the professor to turn it into a proposal. I've never, prior to this, I had no research experience. I always thought research was something very complicated that wasn't for me. So I was very hesitant to take this professor up on this offer, but she offered to be a mentor to me and let me know that she would help me along the process. And so I essentially what I did was I found the proposal requirements. Like Dr. Cusick mentioned, there's different requirements, whether you want it to be a poster digitally or in person, or even having a talk. So it really all depends on what you're doing. But I was able to actually turn this paper into a proposal. I created my abstract, my learning objectives, and was able to submit that. And then it got accepted, and I was able to actually um, give this presentation. So it's actually not an overly complicated process, but I think one thing that students often do is um, when we don't know something, there's a little bit of fear in it, and we often assume that it has to be this overly complicated process when really a lot of the materials that you've written over time in your classes can easily be turned into research proposals and projects. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of the different presentations that occurred um, at APA. As you see, I did a poster. So I turned that um, proposal into an actual research project that I completed, and then turned that into a poster presentation that I gave at APA as well as Division 32. So you see an example of just the different posters. So you stand by your poster, people will come and talk to you and ask you about it. And it's a really cool way to, one, engage in research, but also practice your presentation and clean up your presentation skills. And as you can see, there's different forms of posters. So we have Jennifer doing a presentation at the Cultural Appreciation Conference, where she gave a talk and used a presentation PowerPoint. We have Zena Laham, who did a presentation at the Division 45 conference, and so that's a poster. And so you see there's all these different types. And then if you see at the bottom, you have Manda, Ray, Samek, and Layla doing a talk presentation at the conference. So your presentations can come in so many different forms, and there are so many different avenues. And what we'll talk about later is just the sheer number of conferences that you're able to apply to and get accepted in and be able to actually do presentations at. So in terms of proposals, like Dr. Cusick was mentioning, we have two pathways for proposals. The first being literature review proposals, and the second being research proposals. The literature review proposals provide a summary of the literature base, and essentially you're clearly identifying the scope of the review. So that will be the who, the what, the why of the review. So for example, I did my proposal on racial battle fatigue. So my who was African American males. The what was racial battle fatigue, and the why was to really take a look and see how racial battle fatigue impacts the anxiety of African American males. And then in the literature review, you want to identify known trends, but also more importantly, the literature gap is for the literature review lets you really talk about the gap in the literature and why you are exploring that. And then also identifying implications and future needs for research and practice. So you're really collating a lot of the history of whatever your subject is, but then also talking about the gaps and then also the implications and the future needs. In terms of research proposals, you're describing first the rationale for the study. So why are you even doing this study? And then also briefly describing the hypothesis, sample, and the methods. So almost like a mini abstract is what you'd be doing for your research proposal so that the proposal committee can get a deeper understanding of your of your research project. And then also you're reporting the findings and identifying implications for research and practice. And also you include a brief literature review. So you can see how the literature review can even lead into the research proposal in terms of your research project. And so essentially, identify a paper the one way to start off a research proposal is really to identify a paper that you've written that you're proud of. And even sometimes professors will, like in my case, reach out to you and say, hey, you did a good job on this. Have you considered turning this into a proposal? And so you want to really take a look and understand, why did you choose this paper topic? And then after you've done that, you want to think about who will be interested in this topic. Oftentimes there are other students or other people who are interested in the topic that you've written on. And so being able to um, know what the interest is can impact the conference you submit to. So for example, I submitted to APA on Division 45, which is the cultural race and ethnicity. And that's how it worked out in terms of the connecting to their proposal, um, their call for proposals in terms of just um, racial uh, research projects. And then also knowing what would someone know after your presentation. So these are all important things to think about when you're thinking about identifying a paper you've written and wanting to move it into the proposal phase. And then finally, or you want to think about, how does this paper align with the requirements of the conference? So each conference that you're applying to will have what they call a call to proposal. And this is essentially a call for research projects, proposals. And what they will do is take a look to see if your proposal aligns with the requirements for their conference. Because each conference usually typically has a theme that the research proposals all follow. And one thing to note is that conferences may not identify a literature review by name as a proposal, but that's always an option as well. And then also thinking about in terms of how your paper aligns with the requirements of the conference is talking about the directions for future research, and is the review that you're writing thorough enough? And this is, if you have questions about that, this is where you can reach out to your professors. I really encourage you to find a professor to see if they can be a mentor for you when it comes to research. Dr. Buzzlitz did that for me. And then also leaning in on our resources. So the library is really, really helpful in terms of helping you kind of just collate your collate your work so that you can turn it into research proposals. Working with Stephanie and now Georgia, I'm sure they're more than willing to help you. You just have to have the courage to ask. And even it can be as simple as, I want to do research, I'm not sure. How do I even move forward? And then Stephanie you can reach out to Stephanie and the other members of the library, and they'll help you with that as well.
Thanks for the shout out, Nelson. But yes, I will just, say that, I meet with students quite often to talk about research. And it ranges from, I don't know where to start, to, I have this paper, do you think it's suitable for a proposal? Reviewing actual proposal abstracts that you've written before you submit them. Rachel and I will do all of that and sit down with you, if you are interested or wanting to find some way to get started. And if we don't know the answer, we'll recommend a faculty member to go and talk to. Because we generally have an understanding of who has interest areas and what, and where we can recommend.
So in terms of the actual proposal, the bulk of it is going to be your abstract. And essentially the abstract, I like to describe it as like your sales pitch. And this is your opportunity to kind of sell your research proposal and convince the committee as to why they should take it up. And so it's the core element of your proposal, and it's really meant to be a summary of your entire project, but in a very concise way. So it's going to have all the elements of your proposal, of your research in it in a probably small, like I would say some abstracts requirements are 250 words, some are 500 words, but it varies. But you always want to check the requirements for each conference that you're applying to. And then sometimes they're structured, and sometimes you might have specific headings within it, versus the single kind of narrative paragraph where you're just kind of talking about your proposal and your research as well. But the abstract is something you really, really, really want to focus on and hone in on, because, like I said, that's going to be essentially the advertisement for your entire research project. And then objectives. So oftentimes a lot of conferences require objectives along with the abstract. And so typically you're identifying 2 to 4 objectives. So essentially, what are the key takeaways that the audience are going to have after attending your presentation? And sometimes that can lead into what they will be able to do or know after you've done that presentation. And essentially, it's a way to talk about how others can apply the information they've learned from your presentation. So between the abstract and the objectives, that's going to be the bulk of your proposal. And one thing to know is that you don't have to have everything done for your research project before you can submit a proposal. Like I had initially, when I initially did my presentation on racial battle fatigue in African American males, all I had done was the literature review, and I got that accepted as a literature review proposal and did that presentation. And then I was able to do that presentation as a talk and as a poster as well. So there's ethically, there are rules in terms of where you present your papers or conferences, but that's something we can talk at another point. But like I said, the abstract and the objectives are going to be the bulk of your proposal.
All right, thanks so much, Nosa. Before we get into examples, we're gonna just talk about some tips for proposal success. So we've talked a lot about looking at the conference guidelines. This is really your rubric for how to actually construct your abstract. So it will tell you the exact titles. If it has headings for a structured abstract, it will give you word counts. It will tell you if it needs to be blinded or not blinded. Blinded meaning take away any identifying information for where your study happened, or if you're doing a literature review, making sure you don't include any information that would identify you. And so really that is the #1 starting place for starting any proposal, is identifying a conference and looking at their submission guidelines. I think one of the things that I often see when I work with students is the struggle to get an abstract proposal into the word count. So it is hard to take a 10 to 15 page paper that you've written for a class and just distill it into a very single paragraph. So again, having your writing be very concise and getting to the point is important with an abstract, because it is the one thing that you are being evaluated on to determine, does this fit into the conference or not. So I have seen submissions get rejected for going over the word count or even under the word count if there is a range given. So if you are, if a conference says it has to be between 250 and 300 words, and you do 245, I've seen people get rejected over not enough words, which seems silly, it really does. But following to the letter the actual submission guidelines is important, and making sure that you are covering everything that a reviewer would need to know about what your project is about. Again, whether that be a literature review or a research proposal. I also serve as a reviewer for my conference abstracts for my national org every year. And I will say, if something does not make sense, if I cannot understand after rereading something twice, then I'm gonna say, nope, I'm done. If you didn't clearly like proofread or get across to what your abstract was about, then that's an immediate way to just eliminate abstracts. So it's really important. And I did say proofread, and that is also one of the best things that you can do. Have a friend read it, have a faculty member, have one of the librarians read it. Again, what we see when we've been so entrenched in writing something for so long, it may be obvious to someone else who reads it for the first time. So have a proofreader. You can exchange. It's you know, this is a very supportive environment where we want you to succeed. So we're happy to proofread for you. I literally just said that. Get someone else to read and provide feedback. I'm ahead of myself. The last thing to talk about is the number of conferences you can submit proposals to. There is a practice known as double dipping, which it's essentially you submit the same abstract to multiple conferences without knowing if it's going to get accepted. Really, what you should be doing, and this is true of publishing too, which I'll just put a little promotion out there for the publication interest group that's going to be restarting up in January. That's the next step after you present at a conference. Maybe you can turn this into a publication. But same practice. So if you've been submitting, if you have an interest in going to multiple conferences, think about a unique aspect to that. You can think about, you know, if it's an institutional conference like the CAC, the Cultural Appreciation Conference, that's a little different because the audience here is the institution primarily. You can use that basically as a running, use it as a practice run and then take it to a larger conference after that. But you don't want to be presenting the same thing at multiple conferences that have the general same audience or the theme. NOSA mentioned presenting something at Division 45 and then also presenting at APA. Again, those are very distinct audiences. So you have the division, which is really focused on one specific area, and APA is a very generalist conference, so it's looking much larger. So think about who your audience is, and again, just making sure that you don't just submit for the sake of submitting just to get more things on your CV, because if you do that, that may not actually turn out to be what you hoped, and APIC will look at that and say like, oh, you have too many things that you presented the same thing at. Can you tell us about that? So just making sure that you have a unique angle or a unique audience that you're presenting to. Oh, and the very last thing, make sure that at least one person on your team intends to go to the conference. They do require usually one member to attend a physical meeting unless it's a digital virtual conference specifically. But I had a student just recently in the last 2 years that submitted to multiple conferences and got accepted to every single one, and they were on different topics and different presentations. And then they came back to me and was like, how do I pay to go to all these different places? It was like 5 or 6 places. And I was like, well, we only have a couple of things through the school, and then it's pretty much on you. It's very expensive. I mean, if you think about like the travel costs, the lodging, the registration, there are discounts for students, but it does add up very quickly. So make sure that you are financially stable to be able to attend anything that you submit to, or at least you have, if you're working in a group or a team, having one person be able to say, even before you submit, yes, I plan on attending the conference. So that's something to consider. And you can absolutely do group and team proposals. That's very common. Okay, before we go on to the examples, I want to pause there for questions. What questions do you all have that we just covered about proposals? Yeah,
If someone proofreads it, it doesn't even have to be on it.
No, not at all. there are international guidelines for who should be included as an author, whether it's a presentation or a publication, and it has to have some substantial contribution. And that could be throughout the process, or it could be like they were really integral in terms of data collection. And they contributed in some way to the final piece of it. But proofreading is not at all like part of being an author. If you asked me to do it, I would never expect to be an author on your proposal just for reading and giving you feedback. So I think what you hear a lot, especially in the medical field, is that you'll have like, the researcher lab, head that's been on every publication that's ever come out of here. Were they truly involved in a meaningful way in every one of those projects? Probably not. I feel like psychology is very different though. People really respect if you're going to meaningfully contribute, that's what grants you authorship. So that's a great question. What other questions do you all have? Anyone online too?
I would like, so I'm a PsyD 1, right? I was just curious if there's like a more optimal time, like within my 4 or 5 years here where I would be maybe doing something like this. Like where might I be scaffold enough to like do a proposal?
In my opinion, anytime. So especially this semester, if you think about like your ethics paper and if you have your psychopathology paper as well, those are literature reviews. And I've seen many students take those papers and put them into a proposal at a conference. So it's very manageable. Once you start getting into dissertation, that's yet another opportunity on top of the things you're already doing. So I've seen students after they go through the first dissertation class where you're coming up with your topic and your area of focus, and you have to write a literature review. You're writing a 25-page chapter delving into the literature. That could be a presentation proposal as well, just looking at your literature review. I've seen students present just that, and then as they get farther down into their research for dissertation, they might present the entirety of the project once it's complete or near completion. So I think you have the opportunity now. And I see a lot of MAs online as well as Ivan. I think you have the opportunity in the master's program, especially as you've written papers, to think about it now. There are lots of conferences coming up that will have calls for proposals that you could take something that you've already written for one of your classes and be able to submit it as a proposal. So I think everybody in this room who is attending has the opportunity, no matter where you're at in your program, to have the potential for this. And for PsyDs, you do have, I think, more opportunity because you're growing as you go throughout the program and your research is increasing. So I hope that answers your question. Dr. Cusick or Nosa, do you have anything to add?
Specifically for you, Morgan, I would say the work, and Nosa, I think you can probably speak to this as well. There's different times during the PsyD program that you are feeling a time crunch. So doing something, getting started in year 1 is, I think, a great way to start. Year 2, Nosa, do you agree, is a lot?
Yeah, year 2 is a lot because you're starting your practicums, you're really focusing on that clinical aspect, and you're also doing CCE, and that takes up a large portion of your time and your mental energy. So I really encourage people in the master's program, but also in your first year as a PsyD, and I know I say this with a asterisk, when your load is lighter, not that first year is light, but it's easier to incorporate things and start things your first year than your second or your third year. Like, I have lots of research ideas. I just don't have a lot of time to execute said ideas. So really being able to start something off, even if it's just a literature review, Your first year is always a good bet.
Thank you, Nosa.
All right, for those of you in the room, you now have your handout. For those of you online, I put in the chat the link to the handout of example accepted proposals that students have done while they've been at MSP. And they're from a variety of different conferences. So looking through that handout, we pulled out a couple for the PowerPoint, but I think some of the things to look for are looking at the structure. So some of them are single paragraphs, so it's unstructured, meaning it's just a single paragraph looking at what's here. So this example one from the Michigan Academy of Science, Arts, and Letters, this was a poster presented by one of our students a little while back. And you can see here in this example by Evan that she was able to pull together an abstract that included a literature review. It explained, what the theme areas were that were identified in the literature, and that where the future research was still needed in terms of what was next. Similarly, this is a Division 32 literature review proposal, and this was by 3 different students who presented together. This was also a poster, but do you notice any differences right off between this one and the first one? Here's the Michigan Academy one, and here's the Division 32. Any differences that you see or similarities?
I can get us started off. There are references in this one versus the other one.
Yes. So again, this goes back to your conference guidelines. So some may require that you put in abstract citations within your abstract. Others may ask you to put a separate reference list as another field after you've put in your abstract. And others just say no references at all. So it really does depend on what you're doing, but these are very similar in terms of their structure. They're both literature reviews. They both included essentially just an unstructured way to look at the literature. This one has references, the other doesn't. And then again, the last sentence here, identifying gaps in current educational training and specialization programs would improve mental health care for individuals with ASD. So again, that key component of always linking your proposal back to the field. Why should people know this? What is important about it? And it can be as simple as that one sentence that wraps it all up of why should people care about this? So for the sake of time, we won't go into the other handouts, and we'll send out this handout along with the slides so that you can have it for later. But just generally looking at those as good examples to follow. Okay, I'm gonna pass it back to Dr. Cusick, who's gonna wrap up to think about, okay, you're all excited and ready. Now, where do we start? Where do we go?
Okay, so looking at identifying conferences that you might want to present at. So you can see Georgia, again, thank you, Georgia, for putting together this wonderful graphic, which shows where, this is from the 24-25 Research and Scholarship Report, where do people from MSP, where did they present? And you can see 53%, so over half presented at a national conference, which is amazing. And then it varies from there. So let me go over just a couple different conference types. So there's generalist conferences. The one that comes to mind APA is a generalist, it's psychology, but it has, it represents all different, a very broad take on psychology, which is a very broad field. Other generalist conferences, like the Midwestern Psychological Association, the Michigan Psychological Association, these are generalists, meaning like if you can submit an abstract to do a poster or a presentation, and it fits their theme for the year, generally, that, you know, it could line up nicely. There's also specialty conferences. So at MSP, you often hear about Division 32. It's the humanistic psychology division. NOSA had mentioned Division 45, which is like race and culture. There's other, I don't know all the numbers, but I mean, there's 54 divisions that specialize in different areas. So there's neuropsych, there's a clinical psych division, there's, I think, a teaching division, there's one specific for women, and a whole bunch of other ones. So if you have a very specific specialized topic, you can look on APA's website, you can look at those different divisions and see, okay, it would actually fit really well here, and then see when is their conference being held. Again, with the conference levels, international, obviously, I mean, there was a small percentage that did an international conference, which is really cool. The national, again, I always think of APA, but there's other ones across the country. Regional, so a lot of students here do MPA in Chicago, which is the Midwestern, and then there's also the Michigan Psychological Association, which also hosts, I think, usually like a spring and fall. Yeah, 2 per year. Okay. And then state. So within the state of Michigan, we have our Cultural Appreciation Conference here that we always have it at MSP in the spring. So a lot of students present there. They present a poster. A lot of them will present a talk. It's a really good starting point too if you haven't presented before. There's also the Michigan Arts and Sciences, which kind of, I think it's digital this year, and so it's all online. It kind of moves across the state. That one's unique in that it's not necessarily specific to psychology. I went about 10 years ago. There was a group of students when I was a student here, and we were grouped together in the psychology section, but there was like a medical section or a biology section. So represented by students from across Michigan. So again, that's another one to get a good start at.
This is where I first presented as a graduate student too.
Yeah, so and then the institutional MSP ones, again, I think the Cultural Appreciation Conference is a good one. So in terms of tips for identifying conferences, so this is from the Research at MSP page. You can, this is clickable, right?
Yes, but the next slide also.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is a great list curated by NOSA, which basically lists the different conferences. Again, and these are usually, this list is coming from, here are traditional places that MSP students and or faculty have presented at. It also has, again, is it local? Where is the location? The date, which a lot of the dates are to be determined, just don't know yet. Website, cost, again, a lot of the conferences will offer student discounts, but you are having to consider, like, what does it cost to attend? Where is it located? Travel, that sort of thing. It also is going to highlight, this list is going to highlight deadlines for submission. So I really want to stop in here for a second and just say, when it comes to the deadlines for admission, some of them are coming up pretty quickly. I know, like, the Division 32 is December 1st. APA, I believe, is early January. It will have it on the spreadsheet. I just can't see, it's too small. What I think is important to remember is if you are interested in presenting at a conference and say you're working on a paper, maybe you're not done with it, but you feel like, okay, this is gonna be this I can completely like turn in, like say it's a literature review, like I can turn this into a presentation or a poster. You can write the abstract even if you're not done with the paper. I have a bunch of some students here, some students at Saybrook and faculty at Saybrook. We're working on a research project. We have finished data collection. We're still analyzing the data, and we have 2 conferences that we've already like written the abstract for that we're ready to go in terms of like proposing it. We also plan to publish it, but we haven't written anything. I mean, we have all sorts of notes and stuff. So we're submitting to present at these conferences because we have enough information to know, like, we have people to go to the conferences to represent. And we have, even though we haven't finished the data analysis, we can still write an abstract on what we've done. So you don't need to be completely finished with the project to be able to write an abstract and submit. I think sometimes that people get hung up on that. So I just wanted to point that out. What else? Let's see. So this is a great list, and NOSA's constantly updating it, so you can check back for that. You can also every week on Friday, Dana sends out those emails that has a bunch of information with upcoming dates related to the school, but it also she'll highlight any upcoming like conference opportunities, deadlines. I think it's helpful, and I do it every Friday. I just want you to know, Dana, when I get it. There's often attachments, and so opening attachments, because there might be like, oh my gosh, this conference I hadn't heard of, and oh look, this is something that I'm interested in, or a student might be interested in. Talking with faculty, librarians, other students about your research interests, I think this is a really, really great way to get started and get connected to research if you're maybe not as familiar with it. Again, we've seen students, I mean, Nosa spoke to his experience, like starting off with like, okay, I don't really have a lot, and then getting started, and I think building confidence around it is it's really helpful. So faculty, librarians, other students can be really, really helpful for that. And they can also be helpful. We just had a student this week. She's presenting in California at a neuropsych conference, and again, she I think it started with some assignment in class, and a bunch of students along with the professor said, like, we can take this research and we can present it, and she volunteered to go to California and present it. So again, another example of like a specialty conference. And then reviewing, I mean, the librarians work really hard on putting together this research and scholarship report every year, looking through that. And again, it's available. There's a link in the slides here, just seeing like specifically where students have gone. You can see the list on the right there. Some of those are specialty divisions. Again, the Division 32 typically has a lot, but then it kind of runs the gamut from there. All right, so then wrapping up, we've talked a lot about, okay, so here is determining, that you want to write an abstract, you want to submit. How do I do that? Who can help me with it? Where do I present? The next thing, and this is very important, and I know a huge consideration, how do I pay for this? So PsyChi offers reimbursement scholarships. There'll be an application that opens in semester 2. Typically you have to just submit your expenses, and it's typically around $100 to $150, depending on our budget, that we will reimburse students. But even on the PsyChi, if you look at their national page, there's a number of scholarships available on there worth looking at and applying. We've had students apply for scholarships through PsyChi National and receive some nice funds to support them. MSP also offers reimbursement scholarships. With that, they determine at some point, where are people going? But they do tend to fund, the larger conferences first. And again, it's not like, here's $3,000, go, to Las Vegas, and I mean, it's a small amount, but there are ways out there to do it. I just had students in one of my classes, I think there were 6 of them, that left on Friday morning a couple weeks ago, drove up to Traverse City, presented a poster together. They can all put it on their CV for when they're applying to APIC. And I was sad for them because they didn't stay over, and I just loved Traverse City, but they drove back that night. So one day, a bunch of friends going and doing this, like, didn't cost them a whole lot of money. There's a number of students, like when the Midwestern Psychological Association it's in spring, it's usually at the Palmer House in Chicago. Students will drive together, maybe share hotel rooms, things like that. So there's different ways to kind of get around some of the funding issues. And again, there's the digital conferences too. That's again, if you can meet the requirements and the submission deadlines, that's something easy. It's not going to be expensive to hop on Zoom and attend and present a poster or even a talk. So, any
Dr.
questions?
Cusick,
Yes.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but before you move on, in terms of funding, a lot of the APA conferences have funding as well, whether it be it travel stipends or scholarships, or even funding to help fund your research. So that's something that I can help connect you guys with, but is also on the APA website, and that'll also be in future research communication coming from MSP.
Awesome. Thank you for adding that, Nosa. That's again a really good resource for finding funding to present.
Mhm.
So does anyone have any questions about anything that we've covered today? Questions about writing an abstract? So then, our final slide here is just to, I wouldn't say it's the shameless plug, but we do want to alert you to our next workshop, which it's usually held in early January. We haven't determined the date yet, and it's usually myself, Stephanie, and Nosa. We will host another workshop where hopefully we have students that attend and say, like, look, I submitted an abstract, and I have to, or I'm excited to, I get to present a poster. How do I turn this paper into a poster? So we have a workshop on that. There's beautiful templates, and it's again, taking a 15-page paper and condensing it into poster format. It's not as difficult as one thinks sometimes. So we have a workshop dedicated to that. And again, faculty, the librarians, other students, if there's, for the master's students, if you connect with PsyD students, and for like PsyD ones who are in the first semester, talking to the 2s and the 3s and so on, can be really, really helpful, just to get ideas about research. Any final closing remarks, Nosa or Stephanie?
No, just thank you all for coming today, and we will be sending out the recording, the PowerPoint slides, and the handout to everyone who attended and anyone who RSVP'd who couldn't be here. So that'll probably be late this week, early next week.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. And have a good rest of the week.